In life, you're always answering back to one group of people in particular, your parents. You're either, in life, acting out what they did and taught and thought, or you are rejecting what they did and taught and thought, but you are always answering back to your parents. When I was about my son's age, I was primarily obsessed with three things: soccer, world geography, and the world wars. I had a large map of the world on one of my bedroom walls, and I would gaze up at teeny tiny England, where we lived when I was a child, and compare it to massive USSR, Canada, United States, Brazil, Australia, the oceans, and wonder about the great big wide world out there. And then on another wall, I had a huge poster that contained the timeline of World War II. In England, at least as I recall, most children had a sense that the Battle of Britain and the period after the war in the 1940s, when rationing was in effect for many years, I still remember my grandfather telling me about frying Spam over and over and over again. It truly was a special time in the nation's history, obviously. And so I learned a great deal about World War II. And I learned through reading the things that were on that poster about Imperial Japan, and therefore kamikaze pilots. And so one night I had one of those quite special nights, a special night when your father sits at the foot of your bed and you ask him questions about history and about geography and about sports. And I came to ask him about those pilots and why they did what they did. He told me that they had sworn an oath. That meant that they had promised to give their lives for Japan. And so I asked him, my father, who at that time I thought was the model of conviction, integrity. I still do, of course, but at that time he was also the smartest man alive and the strongest man alive and many other superlatives, someone with all the answers. And I asked him if he would give his life like the kamikaze pilots had done, if the Queen gave him a call and told him that that's what he had to do. This was a man whose parents had both served in the Royal Air Force in World War II, whose uncle was a tail gunner in a Lancaster bomber, whose great uncle is buried in Ypres. And I thought he would give a surefire 100%, absolutely, if the Queen calls me up, I'm gone in the morning. And instead, what I got was a 1,000-yard stare. There was hesitation. When he finally gave an answer, there were many conditions attached to that answer, and there was a story. Now, the contents of his answer, what he actually said, are far less important this morning than recalling the surprise I felt at seeing my father struggle with loyalty. That is, that when I asked him about loyalty to Queen, flag, and country, he also juggled loyalty to family, to friends, to country and community, to prospering, to doing the next right thing, to living life well, to living life with integrity and conviction. I was surprised at the idea that loyalty could be fluid or something other than all in for country, queen, and flag, no matter what, no matter where. This was deeply unsettling for me. Now, for those of you who were raised in a church setting, there is another group of people that you are always answering back to. That is your Sunday school teachers. Today's scripture reading, or at least verses 5 and 6, were the first verses in the Bible that I memorized. That's right. My Sunday school teachers taught us these verses before we ever learned John 3:16. We learned and memorized a lot of Bible verses when I was in Sunday school. Verse 5 and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not rely on your own insight. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. The first word in the Bible that I memorized was trust, and that it was with all my heart that I should offer that trust. And then the following line in verse 5 suggests that my own insight, my own understanding, my own knowledge is unreliable. What I took from that was that if I had trust here, then I didn't need to rely on what's up here. This is the kind of theology that ultimately I walked away from as I went to college and then seminary and grew into an adult. It's not that I now think that my insights are particularly reliable or that I have all of the answers. It's just that I've learned that if trust exists only in my heart, that my heart can do some extremely strange things. This is played out in my own loyalties or our own loyalties all the time. Indeed, loyalty, as much as it might be expressed in patriotic terms, particularly at this point in our year and in our cycle, for us, loyalty is played out just as much in what we buy. One day, deep in my heart, according to the trust and understanding that I have in my heart, I may decide that mint chocolate ice cream is superior to moose tracks, or that I would rather drive a certain kind of car over the one that I have now, or any other range of preferences that may occur in my heart that gives me the warm and fuzzies. Consider back in 1984. All of you who were around then were told and given the clear picture that Apple painted of Windows users, that Windows users were unhip corporate drones that loved boring beige shaded boxes and Excel spreadsheets. Some of you still love Excel spreadsheets. But conversely, Apple was the cool, savvy product for young people on the cutting edge, doing creative work and fighting against the man. This kind of branding strategy and all its subsequent iterations has affected the way in which people feel about the technology that they use. Neuroscientists now will tell you that the same areas of the brain that light up for those of us who are religious when we are offering adoration and praise and thanksgiving to God are the same areas of the brain that light up for Apple users when they think about their iPhones. Yes, loyalty has changed over the years. Now when an iPhone breaks, people will take it personally. How could you let me down like this? How am I going to organize my life now that you have disrupted me in this manner? We may as well say, I thought you loved me. Trusting in my heart sounds like dangerous territory to me, not because I don't enjoy feeling warm. I greatly appreciate John Wesley's I felt my heart strangely warmed as he described the love of the Spirit. I have felt that too. I have felt belonging within God. I have felt it in prayer and in adoration and joy, and I felt it as well in mourning and sadness and the deep and consequential moments of life. I have felt that warmth as I gazed upon the night sky and became stunned by the aching beauty of the universe. But as Lutheran Hans Feeney once said in discussing the education of children in the church, we have now come to a place where what makes a Christian is not the substance of what he or she believes, but the feely-goody feelingness with which he or she feels it. Such a notion will then cultivate faith, like seed sown on the rocky soil, resulting in a large crop of feely, goody-feeling Christians filing away from the Christian faith the moment it stops feeling good to be a Christian. Verse 5 will look and sound quite different when we recognize that for people in ancient times, this, the heart, was not actually the center of feelings or emotions. It was, in fact, the center of thought, rational cognition. The folks who were around crafting Scripture, editing and compiling what we know of now as the Bible, did not associate the head with thinking and the heart with feeling. In fact, it was the opposite way around. Thought came from the heart. And so verse 5 and verse 6 look quite differently. And if it's okay with you, I'd rather retranslate them for us in our time, acknowledging that head and the heart are turned on their head as we now understand the Scripture. Verse 5 and 6 may read, as trust in the Creator with all God-given creative intelligence. And do not lean so much on your own way of viewing the world. There are some problems that you can't think your way out of. But in everything that you do, give thanks to God, and your path will start to become clear. Trust in the Creator with all your God-given creative intelligence. My goodness. I recall my father's hesitation, and I now acknowledge my own. To what or to whom am I loyal? If the Queen called, would I go? Maybe there are conditions attached to that. If my spouse called, would I go? If my child called, would I go? I could possibly even attach some conditions to those answers too. But what if I believe that everything that I have that is good and right and pure and beautiful was crafted by God? If God called, would I go? I think now that my question to my father, like so many questions from children, was unintentionally unfair, asking us to sort out our loyalties and our sense of trust is a journey rather than a snapshot or a snap judgment. The second chapter of the book of Jeremiah articulates this journey wonderfully. Through the words of the prophet, God speaks to the people and says, I remember the devotion of your youth, your love as a spouse, how you followed me in the wilderness in a land not yet sown. That at one time the nation of Israel offered loyalty like no other, willing to engage in difficulty and trial without questioning, continually giving thanks even under dire circumstances. For neither Judaism nor Christianity understand life as being rooted in happiness, and therefore your loyalties are born out of that happiness. No, the story of Judaism is rooted in a journey of struggle. If you get past the first few chapters in Genesis and you follow along, you will find that things don't start out all that well for the people of Israel, and then they get a bit rough in the middle too. And then eventually the people get to the promised land, only to find out that once they got there, it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. Droughts still happened. Invasions occurred, that the journey was not over. Jesus moves around a lot, too, in the New Testament. He even moved house once. He had a ministry that ranged from place to place and interacted with lots of different people, perhaps to show us that our job is not simply to settle for a status quo, but is about turning your circumstances, our circumstances, no matter where we find ourselves, into a form of blessing. A blessing is the infusion of something with holiness, of spiritual redemption, of the divine Spirit. Or as Rabbi Jonathan Sacks once said, it is our job to etch the everyday life with the charisma of holiness. Our ancient brothers and sisters would not have understood this expression we offer now about the journey from the head to the heart being the longest one. Our ancient brothers and sisters would have understood that the journey is about embracing God with our whole selves, with heart and soul and mind, as the Shema Israel said. This is where the call for our loyalties arrives. In a season of elections, and promises about what others can do for us, and promises about who can make us safe, we are reminded that these beautiful and incredible minds of ours have been given the gifts of both self-preservation but also self-transcendence. We are being continually called into connecting our little stories on this little rock spinning around this vast universe with the big story of the creator of that universe, who gives creatively and lovingly no matter who we are or where we are on life's journey. To whom or to what do you remain loyal? May God's peace be with you.